Well, welcome to Out and About in a Big Easy. I'm your host, PJ LaRive, and my handsome co-host,
Mike Wade.
And we are out and about here on WWL in New Orleans. And Mike, everybody's told me to make sure I say, we're streaming nationally and internationally. We're on iHeart Radio, Podomatic, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube. You can find us anywhere in the United States, Canada, UK, you name it, we're there. And we have a lot of listeners, and I want to say hi to our UK listeners and our British folks and fans, and our Honduran and our Chinese listeners in Hong Kong and all over the world. I understand that we have a pretty interesting, broad fan base, which is really cool for Out and About in the Big Easy here in New Orleans. We do get your emails, folks. Thanks so much for listening. And because our show is only 30 minutes long here on WWL, you can always go to the after party on YouTube and Spreaker and iHeart Radio. And if you just look up Out and About in the Big Easy or PJ LaRive Out and About in the Big Easy, you'll hear the full 1 hour show. So you get 30 minutes of WWL, fantastic sound quality here on the FM channel, and then boom, you can go right into YouTube or Spreaker or iHeartRadio and catch the rest of the podcast, because it's simultaneously sent up to 9 o'clock on Sunday or whatever time we're on any channel. It automatically rolls over to iHeartRadio. All right, stand by. We have a special guest in, Mike, today. You're going to love this. And it's kind of a surprise for you. I'm springing it in. But Mike and fans, you guys are going to love this. Just a quick word from our sponsor, from Professor Pools.
It's 100 degrees in the shade. You're covered with sweat and dying to jump into your cool pool to cool off. But wait, your pool water is green. Why? Your pool pump is broken. Ouch! Hey, but don't worry, Professor Pools has you covered. Broken motor, broken pump, spa heater not working, leaky pipes, automatic cleaning system not working. Don't worry, Professor Pools has you covered. Check them out at www.professorpools.com. That's www.professorpools.com.
And we're back. Mike, I have somebody in the studio today that you are just going to flip out on. I know you're a big Jamaican reggae fan, right?
Love reggae.
You know what? I have Dex, a musical genius. The most handsome Jamaican man I have ever seen, man. I don't even know if I can get through this.
Almost Jamaican.
So Dex has got the whole crew jammed into this studio, ready to play. Now, we can do this a couple ways. We can say, hey, Dex, let's ask you a couple questions, or we can get the band fired up and just get it cranked. Mike, which would you prefer?
Let's crank it.
Let's crank it. All right, hold on. Folks, you're listening
let me get my red stripe first, and then
go get your red stripe. Folks, you're listening to Out and About in a Big Easy. This is Dex Delay. Oh, you're going to like this, Mike. Like, I'm really not sure how we squeezed all these guys in this room. But I tell you what, it sure sounds good in here. Mike, tell me this isn't cool, right?
This is the best. Steel drum and reggae. I love it. I wish I was sitting on a beach right now with a red stripe. Wow. Unbelievable. Really
That's
great.
amazing. Mike, you don't know what you're missing because you're not in studio right here with me. To have this sound bouncing off of these walls, it's the most incredible thing.
Yeah. It's incredible.
I'm a lucky guy, man. I'm a lucky guy.
Maybe you should have a pool party after we finish the show here and have a little steel drum by the pool.
You know, that's
with
a great
red stripes
now,
and some margaritas.
Now, you know, that's in the works.
And
bro.
red stripes.
And red stripes. You hear him. He's a drinker. Dex, when did you start playing?
Well, like we say back in Kingston, Jamaica, donkey years ago.
Donkey years ago.
So
That sounds like a lot.
We won't go specific, but I started playing classical piano, and just grew from there. Did a stint with
classical piano.
Yes.
I can kind of see
with the
that.
Associated Board of the Royal Academy of Music
Wow.
in London. They used to come and test me. My piano teacher used to hit me on my fingers when I played the wrong note. So it was quite a little experience there, but back in the day, you know.
No, Mike, earlier when Dex and I were talking, and I was going to lead to a story, but I kind of held it in my head. I wanted to tell this story. I guess I was like 12 years old, and there was a guy in the French Quarter that was playing the steel drum, and man, I went and I talked to him, and I touched it, and he gave me, it was like a stick with a rubber ball on it, and he let me beat on it. It was like one of those bouncy balls. And I said, I want one of these. but they were freaking expensive, right? So there was a place, Whirlines, that sold them, but you'd have to order
it, right?
And it was a lot. It was more than a whole kid could afford. So I went home and I borrowed a steel drum from one of those 55-gallon drums from the church, and I brought it home, cut it, about 12 inches, and just started beating the crap out of it with a maul, trying to make that big, deep indenture. And I think it was probably about 4 hours later, all the neighbors got together and came over and said, well, you got to stop. Whatever you're doing, you got to stop. So my dreams of building my own steel drum
ended right there.
Ended right there, because I think my dad even came outside and said, "Son, you got to stop or I'm gonna beat you." Right. So now the instrument I'm looking at right here, this big chrome gigantic drum, is this a steel drum, or is there another name for it?
Well, down in the Caribbean, we call it a steel pan.
A steel pan.
Yes, that's the colloquial name for it. But the official name is that it's a steel drum because it was really made from a 55-gallon drum. Yes.
Wow.
It always amazes me that a sound like that can come out of there. I mean,
it's the most amazing instrument. I mean, the sound, the quality of the sound in this room, because I have the acoustics set pretty well in here. Mike, it's so amazing. The band, we were talking off air, you play internationally.
Yes, in Jamaica, in New York, we've toured in Japan, but these days we're basically playing in and around the United States.
That's beautiful. Now, in Japan, did they welcome the steel drum, the sound? Did they like it?
Oh, it's funny you say that. If you Google it, you'll find Japanese steel drum orchestras now.
I didn't know.
In fact, the steel drum has become such an international instrument. Just a caveat here: the steel drum was not born in Jamaica; it was born in Trinidad. But because we in the Caribbean meld everything we do. You actually hear more reggae in Trinidad now than calypso,
right?
And the instrument itself has become international, where there are people from Norway and Iceland and Finland and on the African continent now playing steel drums. So I feel proud to be able to play it here in New Orleans, and
we're proud to have you, brother,
and work with it here.
When you coming from piano, classical piano, what in your head clicked to make you go towards this instrument?
Well, that's actually excuse me, that's actually an both an easy and a hard question and answer, because when I was I lived in Brooklyn, New York, which is like the hub of Caribbean culture in the U.S.
Right.
And when I started to hear pan, as we call it, play,
right,
I used to hire what we call Trini musicians to play as my steel pan player in the band.
Oh, wow.
And I've hired some of the really top world-class steel drum players like Bugsy Sharp and Earl Brooks.
Oh, wow.
And Professor. Those are names that people from the islands would know who are into Caribbean music and Caribbean and pan culture would know those names. But I always had an interest in trying it myself. And then one of my bass player, who was from Trinidad at the time, suggested that, why don't you just go buy one, So I found the cheapest one I could get.
Right.
And
that thing is not cheap. I'm looking.
No, it's not. But this is, I'd say this is maybe my 6th or 7th pan since I started up. But my first one, I actually had I was writing the notes on the pan to
Really?
try to get to play it. What I decided to do, though, was that I decided not to get a formal tutor, even though I did get some pointers from watching other pan players play.
Right.
But how I got to play pan was transferring my knowledge of the piano to this instrument, and recognizing that the architecture of the instrument has it has a circle of fifths going to the right and